what is the point of getting Brexit done, as has become what this election is about, if it won't solve any of the problems normal British people actually care about?
And what problems are you thinking of, Josh?
Well, the NHS crisis, the underfunding of schools, the general failure of most public services in the country.
OK. James? This is something Boris Johnson's very keen on saying, isn't he?
Yeah, so I think there are a number of things about getting Brexit done. Firstly, it goes to the heart of what democracy means, because we had a referendum in 2016, and at that referendum, both sides of the campaign, both sides of the debate...
But that's not what the question's about, James. The question is not about the democracy. It's what's the point of getting it done if it won't solve any of the problems normal British people care about? And Josh didn't mention democracy. They talked about the NHS, about education, austerity, that kind of thing.
But the point I'm saying is it goes to the heart of the integrity of our democratic process, and that, in turn, is what underpins all the things that you're saying. Now, the reason that we say get Brexit done so that we can invest in the NHS, in police and education and that kind of stuff, is because whether we are in the European Union or have left the European Union affects the government's ability to intervene, invest and other things. So until and unless you have a plan to deliver Brexit, you can't have a credible plan for anything else. And actually, what we're seeing, like with the PISA results, is we're seeing our educational standards increasing. But what we want to do as a government is we want to go further. We want to invest more in education, more in the NHS, more in policing, so that we can continue the improvements that we have seen and improve things where...
Not in the NHS. You presume you're not talking about improvements in the NHS. It's had the worst A&E waiting figures
we'd love to.
On record.
Well, and that's,
after 10 years of Conservative government.
And that's because what we've seen over that period of time is record increases in demand. So more people are using the NHS than ever before. And not record increases in spending, obviously. No, we have got record increases in spending. We're spending more now on the NHS than we've ever done in the past. But we need to go further. And in order to be able to go further, we need to have a resolution and certainty over Brexit. And that's why we're saying it's important we get this done, so we know what financial framework we've got, what regulatory framework we've got, whether we're in part of the Growth and Stability Pact or not. And so, as I say, until you've got a plan to deliver Brexit, you don't have a plan for anything.
Does that answer your question, Josh?
To some degree, I would say there's a lot more rhetoric there than I'd like to hear. I suppose the core of the question is how. How is what you're proposing going to help people? And how are all these men and women who are dying on trolleys because you're not funding the NHS properly going to be saved, going to be helped because we're not in the EU anymore? I don't...
Well, very briefly, because then I want to come around the table.
I mean, I think you're connecting two different things. So the point is that we want to invest in the public services, and we've got a plan to do so. That plan builds on the investment that we've already put in these public services. But separate to that, why we are so keen to make sure we get Brexit done is because all of us, all the parties represented at this table tonight, promised we would respect the referendum result. And as it stands, the Conservatives are the ones who are actually delivering on that promise.
Annalise.
But Boris Johnson's deal is not going to put an end to this wrangling, because all it deals with is just how we would leave the EU. There's nothing in there that sets out what our future relationship would look like. So if we think that if Boris Johnson gets in, that he'll get Brexit done and that'll be it, and finally we can concentrate on all these important matters, we're deluding ourselves. That's not going to be the reality.
Hang on.
We'll have, may I finish? We'll have many more years of argument over the future relationship. Labour's approach is different. We've said that we've had MPs arguing about this for 3 years, about what way they want to leave in, whether they want to leave. We're saying, let's put this to the people, let you have your say, with a deal that's not the damaging deal that Boris Johnson's presenting, with one that actually says what the situation will look like in the future, as well as now, and put that up against Remain. Well, no, it's not, because it will enable people to have their say on that reasonable deal versus Remain for the first time in 3 years. You know, while MPs have been arguing You've been cut out of the argument, and that shouldn't happen. We get it dealt with, and then we can get on with dealing with those matters.
Can you explain? On the one hand, the Labour position is extraordinary. I mean, it's basically Remain or a version of fudged Remain. You know, there won't be a credible leave option on the table. But the truth is, you say that phase 2, talking about the future simple free trade deal, will take years. And yet you also say that the Labour position is we can get this done in 3 months and have a referendum in 3 months. That doesn't compute. That doesn't work, does it?
There's an enormous... It does compute.
It doesn't compute at all.
Maybe you haven't looked at the Labour plans, but we've said that we would essentially take what Theresa May had before, plus a customs union that sets out the future trajectory. We would set that up against Remain and let people say
you think you could do that in 3 months, and yet you don't think it's possible to negotiate a free trade deal in 11 months?
To the people. No, I don't.
Different things,
because
Richard.
it's a completely different thing. There's already a customs union within the EU.
That we want to leave. We voted to leave. So we voted to leave the customs union.
No, with respect,
we
did. Didn't.
We absolutely did. We voted to leave.
With respect, we didn't. People voted to leave the EU, with various Leave politicians saying that that would mean leaving a customs union or the customs union, others saying, oh, no, it won't. Actually, it's not going to look anything like that.
That wasn't on the ballot paper. On the ballot paper was leave. Let's just all remember that.
Do you know what? Let's not have a wrangle here. Let's see what our audience got, because there's so many hands up. Yes, the woman in the red and black top there with the glasses, yeah.
Yeah. The problem I've got is I'm a traditional Labour voter, Green alignment as well, Green Party alignment, but I voted to leave, and there isn't one party that represents me. I haven't got a clue what I'm going to do on Thursday because I don't want to vote Tory. I don't want to live with Tories' policies, but they're the only parties that are saying they'll get out. Labour are leaving Remain on the referendum. If they get in and they do what they're going to do, they're leaving Remain as an option. If you were saying our deal or no deal, I would vote Labour because I agree with a lot of your policies, but you're choosing to leave Remain if you get in to have another rerun of the referendum and leave Remain as an option.
The woman in the white T-shirt here in the front.
I don't think it's particularly fair to have another vote on something we've already voted for, personally. I am a Labour voter, and I just don't understand how we can continue to keep voting on a subject we've already voted for. Let's just get it done. You know, the issue is the services that are struggling. You're not going to get time to sort those issues out if you're still sat at that table deciding what you want to do. Just get it done.
All right. The woman there in the glasses. Yes.
Mr. Tyson, Mr. Cleverly talk about how it's democratic and how we voted for it, but only 37.7% of the electorate voted leave. And in the first Scottish devolution referendum, just as an example, there needed to be a threshold of 40% of the electorate voting to have a devolved assembly. So why is it different now that you're saying we voted for it and it's democratic when it's technically illegitimate?
And I'm here in the grey T-shirt.
Just to James, in terms of what you said in terms of public funding, you can find £1 billion when you need to blackmail the DUP into voting for you. You can find money when it suits you. That's disgraceful behaviour and it shouldn't be allowed. In terms of Labour, we voted for Brexit. We didn't vote for half in, half out. We got a leaflet, leave the single market, leave the customs union, to leave. We didn't vote for any half measures. What you're trying to do is cloud in the water because you don't like the decision. You were disgraced. You shouldn't be sat there and just shooting the gun. We'll vote you out eventually.
OK, it's just a minute. Ian, you're sitting...
Right.
It's unusually quiet there.
I'm sitting, listening to...
It's the quietest I've ever heard you, actually.
Well, I'm reflecting on what people are saying. Look, I understand the strength of opinion that there is here in Hull, but the question was about what is the point of getting Brexit done. The issue is, if the UK does leave on the basis of what Boris Johnson has put forward, that is simply not getting Brexit done, because we've got to go into the trade talks on the future relationship. And I have to say to you, there is no experience of any country that's conducted and completed trade talks with the European Union in 11 months. It's just not possible. So the harsh reality is, if Boris Johnson delivers what he's saying he's going to do to you, it means that the risk of that no-deal Brexit becomes ever closer. That will happen at the end of 2020. And any rational economic analysis has showed that people are going to pay a price for that. jobs are going to be lost. And in Scotland, we'd be talking about losing up to 100,000 jobs. And of course, we were told in our own referendum in 2014, if we stayed in the UK, that we'd been stayed in Europe. And so for us in Scotland, we've got a very simple choice at this election, because we're not prepared to be taken out of the European Union against our will. And we've got the option of protecting ourselves and becoming an independent country. But on this issue of public services, because there is no doubt that the NHS is a massive issue, and let me make an offer to the people here, because what we've suggested is that NHS spending should increase to the level that we currently have in Scotland, which is £136 higher than what it is here in England. Now, that would mean that you'd have an increase in health spending over the lifetime of the next Parliament in the UK of about 35 billion. We get an extra 4 billion in Scotland. But the challenge of delivering for public services, I have to tell you, is going to get an awful lot harder if Brexit happens, because the economy is going to be weaker. Yes. The best deal that we've got is the one that's staying in the European Union.
Let me just take you back there, because you're saying, obviously, if Brexit does go through next year, obviously depending on who wins the election, you then have a big decision to make. Are you seriously suggesting, because Nicola Sturgeon has obviously talked about having a second independence referendum, if she can, next year, are you suggesting that you would counter the situation where Scotland would come out of the EU because of the actions of the rest of the UK, and come out of the UK in the same year?
Well, we face a very real threat.
But would you do that, realistically?
Let me say to people
leave your two largest trading blocs in the same year?
Well, the European Union is 8 times larger than the UK when it comes to trade. But I'd simply
you'd be out of the EU and you'd come out of the UK as well?
No, we wouldn't, because as things stand at the moment, if Boris Johnson wins, and if we leave the European Union at the end of January, then we're in transition till at least the end of this year. So in effect, we're in the single market, we're in the customs union. The people in Scotland were given the opportunity to vote for the SNP in 2016 in the Scottish elections, and we had a manifesto commitment that if we won that election, on a change of circumstances, that we demanded the right to have a referendum. That is democracy. And I'd simply say to whether it's Boris Johnson or Jeremy Corbyn or anyone else, that you've got to respect the votes that the SNP have gained, the mandate they've gained. And if the people in Scotland next week send the majority of SNP MPs back to Westminster on the basis of Scotland's right to choose, it will ill behold anyone that stops Scotland exercising its right, and yes, having an independent.
Well, let's get back to the question. Let's get back to the question in a minute. With Josh's question, which is, what's the point of getting Brexit done if it won't solve any of the problems normal British people care about? Ed?
Well, Josh is right. The real problem is Brexit won't solve any of the problems. All the economic forecasters show that growth will be lower. That means tax revenues that fund our public services, our health, our schools, our police, will be lower. That's not helping people. Since the referendum, 5,000 nurses have left, EU nurses have left the country, when we have a staff shortage in our NHS. How's that going to help the things that people care about? But let me finish. Climate change is an international issue. If you're not at the international table working with other countries, you're not likely to solve climate change. You know, I remember 3 years ago, there was a guy called President Trump. He got elected saying, build the wall. You know, he's not built the wall 3 years later. They've just started a little section of a 2,000-mile wall. And this is exactly what Boris Johnson, his friend, is saying. Get Brexit done. He won't get it done for 3 years or more. There's no way he can get it done. I was a trade minister. I've been involved in trade negotiations at the WTO, at the EU, with countries outside the EU. You will never get a trade deal done in 12 months. And that means December next year, we'll be either faced with no deal, which will mean loss of income, shortages of food and so on, or he'll have to go back on his word. That is the truth. That is what the evidence shows.
Ed, you know that's just pure scaremongering and garbage. Don't scare the British people.
No,
it's totally
don't
wrong.
mislead the British people. You've been misleading them for years. Everybody
You're
knows.
part of
No,
Project
you
Fear.
have been misleading them. Hang on, not Project Fear.
It's Project Fear.
We have lost 5,000 nurses to our NHS since the referendum. Explain that.
Since the referendum, we employ over 1 million people more than we did at the referendum, and yet you were part of Project Fear that said that 500,000 jobs would go, the banks would go, the tech firms would flee.
Richard, do you want to address the original question?
Yes, go on. How's Brexit going to help us?
The great thing, as James was saying, the great thing, Josh, about Brexit helping us is that it is the foundation of our democracy. You know, the people were told that the government would carry out the will of the people. Here we are, 3.5
jobs?
years later.
What about jobs?
We employ 1 million people more than we did
Okay,
then.
look, guys,
EU.
hang on 1 second.
This is what
no,
hung
wait a minute.
Parliament looks
No, I
like,
don't want to hear from you either, James.
Yeah, this is he's not
Stop talking. How do you think it's going so far? Do we really want to hear you shouting over each other? I, for one, do not. So let's just have a civilised conversation. Now, there's only a week to go, but really, is this any way to go on? Richard, do you want to answer the question?
I'm trying to, but I got interrupted. Josh, the point is, trust in democracy is seriously damaged because 3.5 years later, we haven't yet left. Knocking on doors in the constituency that I'm standing, I'm constantly told by people, we are furious, we're frustrated, we're annoyed, and we're either going to vote for a different party, hopefully the Brexit party, or, tragically, they're not going to vote at all because they've lost all trust in all politicians, and that is a disaster for trust in democracy. Once we've left, then actually the government of the day can get on with organising and doing and running the country much more efficiently. That's the key.
OK, I'm going to hear a little bit more from the audience before I move on. So, yes, the woman here in the front.
Well, personally, I feel democracy's failed me because back 3 years ago, I had a ballot paper and it said remain or leave. And I was promised that if whatever my choice was, I would get that choice, and I haven't. And it just feels like we don't like the answer, so let's have best out of 2, best out of 3. How long is it going to go on for? Another referendum is absolutely ridiculous. The people have spoken once, so do what the people have asked.
OK, what about the man behind you then? No, yes, that's it.
Yeah, I hate to take it back to the original question, but
go on, be
and what you said, Dick, has nothing to do with any of it whatsoever. It's not going to help in any way. That's got nothing to do with it whatsoever. The problems have got nothing to do with Brexit. The problems have been inflicted by the Tories for the last 10 years. You've treated the working class with disregard for 10 years, and you're using Brexit as a tool to say that everybody that's against it, it's a scapegoat. You've treated with absolute disregard for a long time, and it's got nothing to do with Brexit.
OK, let me take one more. The man in the blue sweater towards the back, yeah.
You've heard it in this room many times from people of all political persuasions. We told you 3 years ago we wanted to leave. Now, please, get on with it.